We have with us on set for the first segment Dr. Joel Cervantes, who's a neurologist, a neurosurgeon. My apologies. Doc, you've been hearing the buzz about the back and forth between the conversations about legalization of marijuana. It is an international movement. Canada has just legalized marijuana. But we wanted to have a conversation this morning with you about medicinal marijuana and the benefits and use of it. I wanted to first start off the conversation by talking about the chemical component, what it is made up of, and what is the effect of that on the brain.
Okay. To begin with, a marijuana plant, and when you talk about marijuana, obviously it's cannabis, right? And that you have, it's said that you have, the main one is cannabis sativa, you have indica, and there are others, ruderalis, and there's even some synthetic ones, or not synthetic, but they're like crossover breeding. So in nature, there exists about 60 types. Wow. If you want to call them varieties. There is controversy if it's species, but let's call them varieties. There's also synthetic that is made in labs. And but the crossbreeding, there are over 6,000 types. So nature has provided 60, but humans have already, by crossing sativa, indica, and in different proportions and other varieties that they have, we have about 6,000 worldwide. Now, a marijuana plant, and of course, as a doctor, I'm not a herbalist, or I'm not a scientist that knows all the ins and outs of marijuana, but I read, and of course I'm into courses, and I get into it, right? A marijuana plant has about 750 chemicals. Of those chemicals, the parts that interest us, whether it has to do with getting high, the effects of getting high, or possible medicinal effects, they break it down to about 421. We're going to break it down further. What is a big controversy is the famous THC, which is the part that gets us high. And then we have the other half of that is the CBD, cannabinoids. Remember, in the brain we have our own cannabinoids. So Mother Nature provides CBD in the plant. Of that CBD, they know approximately 104. How many have been studied or are being studied? About 18 to 20. Where there's a lot of research worldwide.
A lot to unlock.
Of course, Belize is not on the map for that. We don't have anything. So any information we have to get from sources outside. The US, Canada, Europe, New Zealand, Australia, Jamaica, right? Those are the countries that we know more about. So generally speaking, let us break it down to two things: THC and CBD. Well, that comes from a plant. Also knowing that there's also synthetic THC produced in a lab and synthetic CBDs produced in the lab. So humans, pharmacological companies, research companies, are able to manipulate the molecules in the lab.
Now, Doc, I have a friend who says that a drug is defined as the combination of two compounds. That's one definition of a drug. But that cannabis is a plant. It's a plant. So that it is not a drug. To your mind, is cannabis a drug or not a drug? Because as I understand, a drug is something that has no nutritional value. Okay. Is that correct?
All right. Well, all right. The technicalities. Cannabis, is it a drug? It all depends on the variety or the species of the plant, and it depends on what exactly you're going to consume, how you're going to consume it, and what amount you're going to consume. Now, does the marijuana plant have nutritional value? Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Wow.
The part that basically interests a lot of people, the top part of the plant, the flowering top of the plant, the flowers, right? And the leaves, basically, right? So that is the part that we would see more THC. That's if it's a plant that has a high percentage of THC. Now, if we're going to get technical, definition-wise, it is accepted that all marijuana plants have both THC and CBD. Do we have it in the bark, in the stem of the plant, the fiber of the plant? Yes, it does have. And depending on the stage it is being grown, it has been shown that there are varying proportions of THC and, of course, cousin molecules or brother molecules, and CBD and similar molecules. So all marijuana plants have THC and all of them have CBD. The proportion is important. From a law enforcement perspective, and of course I'm going to talk about the US because, well, it's a bigger country than we are, and a lot of our information we get from them. What do they allow legally in these places that have a license to produce medical marijuana? The content of THC that gets a person high has to be 0.3% or less. What does a standard marijuana plant have? Average about 12%. So the marijuana we have in Belize primarily is THC. Well, nobody has studied it. I'm only using this information by talking to sources to our government, people who work in law enforcement, and apparently, it hasn't been studied, apparently we have more marijuana that has THC more than CBD. That remains to be proven by taking samples, of course, and sending them out of the country to serious labs that will be able to study what content it has.
You're talking about speaking to persons in the official arm of government. There was a commission set up to study the effect or the ability to decriminalize substances, which apparently what came back from that committee was something positive, because eventually the laws were passed which changed the laws in relation to possession. Do you know whether or not any of that conversation centered around the medicinal purposes, medicinal usage of marijuana? And more importantly, are there any medical uses for marijuana?
The conversation, there was a mention. There was a mention. It wasn't the main focus. Now, do we have medicinal usages for marijuana? Definitely we have.
What are some of them?
Well, if we're talking about the marijuana plant, right, what we know in Belize as marijuana that you could probably get on the street, it's not in a purified form to be used, and primarily in Belize, people smoke. That's the main avenue.
For consumption?
Yeah, to consume. Is it wrong? Well, I am not any legal or church authority, but if I am, well, I'm a medical practitioner, right? Definitely for me, there's a use for it. Now, why do I say this? And this can make a lot of people get angry at my statement, but I'm a firm believer in the use of medical marijuana. Unfortunately, we have a black market in Belize for medical marijuana products. There are only two avenues. Go to the corner and get it from the guy who sells the weed, that we call it. And the second avenue is that there's already a very active black market in Belize for products that come in primarily from North America.
Imports.
Imports. So as a doctor, there are times that you do identify medical conditions, mine's more neurological conditions, of course, that we don't have any surgery that could help. We don't have any of the known medications, standard medications you go to buy to a pharmacy, whether within the country of Belize or you have to go abroad to get them. There's nothing for certain conditions. We have maxed out everything. And the literature tells you that there is a place for marijuana for medical usage. Of course, we cannot confuse what is for leisure and what is for medical usage. Yeah. I respect any person who wants to consume for leisure. My take on it is there is a purpose, and of course, we are way behind as a Belizean society in getting medical marijuana on board. But the need has created an active black market. In fact, there is even a segment, there's a locality in northern Belize that they even, I don't know how they produce it. I don't know if it's just marijuana, but they're even exporting it to Mexico.
Wow.
So we have people, Belizeans, and I know some are also expats, that are actively in this environment. And it's a bit frustrating because as a doctor, I don't have access to prescribing officially and tell them, go to this pharmacy, you know, or there is nothing in that sense. Even though I think I have started by reaching out to the authorities and trying to get the conversation and to see how this can come about for medical purposes, but it hasn't happened.
No, you say that the drug has, well, the substance has two components to it. It has a lot of
a lot
of chemicals, but there are two focal components, which is the CDB and the THC. Am I hearing you right to say that the THC is the one that is not considered for medical purposes?
No, I'm not saying that.
And that the CDB is really the medical champion?
No, in fact, you touched something very, very important. A lot of proponents would want to say that we should only have access to CBD for medicinal purposes. And of course, CBD, when it's coming along in the plant, it's growing. At different stages, you have other molecules that you get off, subsets, right? And yes, those CBD has no effect getting you high. It has medicinal properties. But I can't sit here today and lie and say that THC doesn't have medicinal properties. It does. And that's where a controversy could be. Now, as a medical practitioner, and of course I wouldn't be able to say this, I can say it for myself, yes, but it would have to be part of a greater conversation with other health professionals in our country, and of course getting guided by experts from abroad. I can envision that there are going to be certain compounds, if I can use that word, or medications or substances prepared in a way that, depending from a medical perspective, whatever diagnosis a patient has, there may have to be a certain percentage of THC. I can envision that a primary component most times is going to be CBD with varying small touches of THC for specific medical conditions. This is what is happening outside of our country.
No, that brings me to another point, which is I was listening to a TED Talk about legalization of marijuana. And one of the person who was presenting was against legalization. And one of his major complaints was precisely what you alluded to earlier, which is that the marijuana which is being smoked or consumed now in 2018 is not the marijuana that was being consumed in the 1920s or 1930s, that in fact pharmaceutical companies, indoor inbreeding and chemicals and production processes have actually focused more on increasing the THC. So there's a fascination with THC, and they've moved away from the natural part of it. So what we're looking at is not marijuana. We're not looking at what God made. We're looking at some Frankenstein of a no drug. Would you accept that as being true?
Yes, there's been a lot of manipulation. In fact, historically, if you go and you look it up, there is a pharmacology book, if you want to call it that way, that is published in the US every year. And historically, between 1851 and 1942, marijuana derivatives and how to prepare them for medicinal use was in this medical book. Our pharmacists know that that is the truth, and pharmacy students, if they look up the history, they're gonna see it. Around 1937, a lot of complaints and the fact that marijuana was being seen from the drug perspective, getting high, and the manipulations that you're talking about with the crossbreeding to increase THC, forced the Medical Association in the US in 1942 to ban it. In other words, to not recommend it anymore as a medical substance. So historically, the US has been there. That's 91 years that they have on the table, that a medical association, not just something that sprung up, a national American Medical Association was vying for the use of marijuana. So perhaps the fact that, you know, for financial purposes, people manipulate what Mother Nature and God has given us, that is what has led to its demise, and it trying to re-emerge now again for a medicinal purpose.
Now, when we look at the industry, there surely is, maybe I should ask it this way, what is the approach or the attitude? You can't speak for the medical profession officially, but from an unofficial poll or just gauging the approach of your colleagues in Belize, what is the approach or view of the medical profession in Belize on this topic?
Okay, I guess I am kind of viewed as a little bit as I'm either
A radical?
weird. Yeah, I'm a radical. I'm a radical. They look at me kind of weird because of my views, but my way of seeing things is what's on the world stage, what is the most advanced, what is the most modern thing going on out there. I think the majority of doctors vocalize against it, but underneath, until they get informed, I think a lot of them are going to be for it. I have had the fortune to present in one of our, the Belize Medical and Dental Association's Congress, not this year, but the year before. I was able to give, I think what was the first presentation about medical marijuana in Belize. Wow. And I also partook in this, this survey when the people came from the Caribbean, yes. Right? I also actually gave my views on my experience in my office coaching patients when they need medical marijuana. How long have I been doing this? Between 6 to 8 years. So it's very small. I'm not trying to throw flowers on myself. I just have a keen interest, and yes, I'm taking my preparations. I study about it. Believe me, I'm very active in this. There are a couple of doctors that perhaps they don't have a status in society. They might be general doctors, and they have a keen interest in it because they are the ones who are at the health centers or in the private offices seeing a patient come in, refer a patient, can you confirm this diagnosis, confirm. What do you think about medical marijuana? Of course, I like to exhaust the avenues of what else exists, unless a patient, you can notice that that is what they need. So if you get into it, you're going to find that there is a place for it in our Belizean society. There is a place for medical marijuana. Under
what circumstances would you say, give me a couple of examples if you can, of where you would think that it would be apropos, it would be appropriate to prescribe the use of marijuana for treatment?
Sure. What is already documented, for example, we have, unfortunately, we have a kind of, for a small country, kind of have a huge population of people who are HIV positive. When this goes from HIV into AIDS, people lose weight. What has been seen, you know, that the use of medical marijuana can help to have a better appetite. It's a stimulant to eat. And in fact, you talk to people.
Why is that?
Well, I come back to what we have in the system. There are 3 systems of cannabinoids, right? So we have phytocannabinoids, what Mother Nature, God sent in the plant. We have endocannabinoids, the system we have in the brain. So it's not only in the brain, but in all our tissues, muscles, in our defenses, in the intestinal tract, which is primitively part of the nervous system. We already have our natural marijuana system that makes us function. The fact that you're alert and you can ask these very good and intelligent questions, and hopefully I'm answering in a very intelligent manner, is because our endocannabinoid system is working well.
Wait, Doc, sorry.
Yes.
Am I hearing you properly that our body is creating some sort of weed-like chemical as we speak naturally?
We all have endocannabinoids. Endo means inner. So cannabinoids is that chemical. Phytocannabinoids, plant, marijuana plant. Endocannabinoids, we have that in our brain. We have basically 2 molecules that they're known that exist in the brain. And then, of course, you have the synthetic cannabinoids that are produced in the lab. That's how it's divided into 3. Wow. So we already have a marijuana system in our body, if I can describe it that way. So every day when we get up, if I get up and I'm energetic and I want to do this, and I have my checklist and I want to do 500 things in a day, my endocannabinoid system is working. If I get up and I'm on the lower side, I'm anxious and I'm depressed, many times that endocannabinoid system is not fine-tuned, it's on the lower end.
So in a circumstance like that where it's low, then consumption of marijuana would almost be like a supplement?
Well, I don't want to say that because directly, no. There are other avenues before that. You'd have to check other things, right? Because that would be irresponsible for me to just say Absolutely. Yes. It would be when you've ruled out everything else. Remember, in the medical field, we go by a system of elimination. So reaching to recommend the use of medical marijuana because you're like on the low side, like depression or anxiety, would not be the first thing. I mean, there are a lot of other things that do exist. And until we can find its place in Belizean society, I want to say this, doesn't matter what other countries are doing. I think we need to start to find what place it has in our society. Because I see people, and I can't say they're dying, but I can see people who are maimed, who are not getting the benefit of medical marijuana.
Wow, that's an extreme statement. You see people who are being maimed because they don't have access.
They don't have access. So I give them information, you know, you can find from so and so, so and so, so and so. And they source, they go and source.
So we're hurting ourselves medically by not exploring the possibilities and what benefits.
We're very much, we're not only hurting ourselves medically, but financially. That's a huge market. I mean, look how advanced Jamaica is. It's for us to tap in, to go to Jamaica, get a little bit of education from our brothers in Jamaica, go to the US, go to Canada, go to Holland, wherever this is being done. I don't see why not. And bring it back home and set it up the way it should be. But as many things happen in Belize, everything has a political background and a financial background. It's, the medical perspective is never going to be first. And at the end of the day, when medical marijuana comes in, what I envision, it's not going to be doctors spearheading this. It's going to be who holds the purse and who holds the political string. And that's just the way, unfortunately, our country is.
Do you think that the medical field should be leading the discussion in relation to legalization?
Definitely. But
Why?
I can only say that as an individual. I don't represent a society. Because there's a use for it and it's scientifically proven. And if I can get back to the question you had asked me about what it can serve for.
Yes, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't finish that answer. For example, people that are having cancer treatments have a lot of nausea, wanting to vomit, or even vomiting. And it works to reduce those type of symptoms. In some forms of fits, what we call fits or epilepsy, convulsions, right? It also helps a lot. In fact, it helps in those cases of epilepsy that nothing else works. It works in some psychiatric illnesses.
But isn't a what do you call it, a psycho?
It's a depressant. It is a psychostimulant.
Psychostimulant.
And it also will cause hallucinations. It depends on the variety of the plant, how much THC it has, how you consume it, and of course the percentage of THC in the plant, in the part that you are consuming. Yes. No, that's basically the flower, the part to the top, okay? Now, from my perspective, the neuro perspective, I can fit it into Belizean society. Unfortunately, we have a lot of traffic accidents. And a lot of people have brain, spine, nerve injuries that with or without a surgery, they're left maimed. So I see a significant, in my area, significant area of our society, a productive society, that at the end of the day ends up being put off medically unfit when they have to go through whatever medical boards, and they stop producing in society. And this would be an option if you compare it to other countries, that one of the substances, if you know how to apply it, use it, recommend it, and it's taken like it's recommended, that could bring back people into the society to be productive.
Doc, you know, the pushback would be, and I could hear it being articulated in this way, that you would be advocating for the use of something which could also create the circle of accidents. So somebody could be saying, listen, you guys legalize this thing or decriminalize it the way you guys have, and it could create more accidents. Is there a correlation between, are there any studies in terms of the dangers, in terms of traffic accidents or the like, which could substantiate or disprove?
Not in Belize, but again, I go back to other countries outside of Belize. I don't know, to be honest with you, if they have had the data and are just releasing it, in other words, years, but now you can find in serious publications that there is evidence, of course. I mean, the higher the THC content, the higher you get, the higher you can cause an accident. You can hurt yourself, right, because you become impaired. I mean, if it's going to give you a depressant effect, peace and love, I sit on my couch and I relax. If it's going to give me a stimulant effect, it's okay. I feel hype, I go and I can work and I can function and I can talk and I can do this. If it gives me an effect where I'm starting to hallucinate, and I lose the reality, my perception is impaired, I can harm myself and I can harm people around me.
And that's another point. Looking at other countries who are far ahead, not only in terms of medical, but also recreational, for example, Canada, there's a restriction that does not allow dispensaries to be in the same locality as where alcohol or other drugs are sold. Because a big issue is the combination. Because we might be talking in a vacuum here and thinking somebody will only be consuming. And when I say consuming, there's a prejudice to most people believing that it's smoking. But I know that almost 60 or 70% of the medical marijuana industry is edibles. Now, my question was, we're not talking about marijuana usage in a vacuum. Surely, there's a possibility of it being used alongside another drug, for example, alcohol or some other drug. Could you tell us about that scenario and what impact that has on the body?
Okay, of course.
And the dangers.
Of course, I'll go back to it now. Whatever the drug you're consuming, usually as doctors we talk about drugs having two effects. I mean drugs to get high, right? They either bring you down, they depress you, or they push you up. Right? So depending on the dosage, if you're going to consume recreational marijuana with alcohol or cocaine, they can crash. Or crash, neutralize, get you very down, or get you very high. Amplify. So that's the danger. Now, having said that, remember what I said, that it all depends on the THC. So if you're consuming strong levels of CBD, it's not psychoactive, there is not going to be a problem. But I do see a place for CBD medications with little touches of THC depending on the condition.
I want us to talk a little bit about the comparisons, because what makes something legal or illegal is a social construct. Because most people will argue, listen, when you look at marijuana, which you have told us this morning has nutritional value and medical usage, some of which we haven't even unlocked, less than 20% we've unlocked. And you compare it with alcohol, for example, which is legal, something is wrong. Can you make a comparison medically between marijuana and, for example, cigarettes?
Yes. Anything we smoke is going to harm the lung. Anything we smoke is going to cause us cancer. Whether
anything whatsoever?
Anything we smoke.
Anything?
Anything. The body is not made to smoke. You have a chemical in this form. When you apply fire to it, we have a piece of raw chicken. When we barbecue it, it gets kind of hard.
Yeah.
And
caramelized.
Exactly. When we leave it there for long, it's going to be carbon practically, right? The same thing happens. When you apply heat or light, it will change the chemical components. It will activate certain components. And some of those things are dormant, that maybe if you had eaten it, drank it, it's not so aggressive for the body. But when you smoke, that's one way a person gets very high, because it reaches the bloodstream immediately, right, to the lungs, to the brain. However, you are not only transforming the THC in its raw form, because it's called THCA. That's how it is in the plant. And when you apply the heat or light or whatever method, it transforms from THCA to THC. Make sense? But
yeah.
It's not only THC that's going to transform. If it has a bit of CBDA, how it comes in the plant, CBDA, it transforms to CBD. But then I mentioned there are about 750 chemicals in the plant. In the part that we're talking about, the top of the plant, 421, 430, 450, depending the literature, 400 something plus. So if we know about THC and CBD, what harmful effects can we have from the other 400 chemicals in that part of the plant in those people who are consuming it for leisure? That is my concern. Okay. Because then how do I know, and I have to speak like a doctor, right? And this is not against the people who want to consume for leisure. I mean, I have to be straightforward. How do I not know we're causing ourselves harm? We're not cooking our kidneys, our liver, damaging the heart, the lungs, and all the tissues we have in the body.
So compared to cigarettes?
Compared to cigarettes, okay. In cigarettes, it is known that there are components that cause cancer. You can find literature with respect to marijuana that says that it is not harmful, and it is harmful. I always stick, I don't stay with the pages, I read them. The pages of the people who are marijuana proponents will say, hey, it's green and it's beautiful. God gave it. But as a doctor and being responsible, I read other pages that are published under the umbrella of the World Health Organization, for example, and you go and you read all the little the attachments, and you go and read in detail all these scientific studies. I kind of find it's hard for them to make it up, where it does also cause harm. So yes, smoking marijuana is going to cause you cancer. It all depends how long you're exposed, how hard you smoke, and it also depends on the strain, the one that you're smoking.
So let me put it plain on the table. You put a marijuana cigarette here and a regular cigarette here. Which one is better?
None. Although the marijuana, if you want to put it this way, the marijuana potentially would have some degree of CBD. So if you put a gun to my head and I have to choose one, I would choose the marijuana over the cigarette, because all I can tell that cigarette can do some people is it kind of like the ingredients like the nicotine, they kind of like, you know, tranquilize you for anxiety, but it also has bad side effects. So I don't consume any, right? I don't. But I'm saying if you put me against the wall, no. Strictly speaking, both cause harm. But cigarettes don't have anything that seems to be like CBD. Nothing medicinal in tobacco in that sense when you're going to smoke it. Tobacco has other medicinal effects. Yes, it does.
And probably we're also being unfair to the marijuana cigarette, because that's not the only way of ingesting it.
Of course.
Unlike cigarettes, where there's only one way to ingest it. And probably if you put it in another arena where it's not ingested by fire or light, it surely would win the race.
So if I may say something, if you were to ask me, Doc, if there were a product, a marijuana product that could be that you could recommend for medicinal purpose, would it be smoked? I would say no. Because smoking anything harms your airways and the whole body. At some point, you're going to get a cancer. So there are other ways to apply medicinally. All right? You eat it, you drink it. All right? They have drops, they have nasal sprays, they even have transrectal, like suppositories. You'd be surprised all that they have. They have topical rubs. I mean, you name it, it exists.
Now, one of the things persons watching might look on and say, listen, am I hearing a doctor who is advocating for the medical use of marijuana in Belize? And their pushback might be, listen, there are children out there. I know in other countries, one of the reasons why they have actually legalized, ironically, is because the complaint was that it's easier for a child using the black market to get hold of marijuana than it is for a cigarette. For a cigarette, you have to go to a store, you have to check you if you're not over a certain age, the store can get into trouble. And so access to it can be regulated. And also another aspect of it, as you speak about the black market, is that it was an attack on the drug trade, because formalizing the market and putting him into the formal economy not only allows you to extract taxes, but it also allows you to know how it is being used. For example, edibles, you can then regulate what the content is. Now, talk to us from that standpoint in terms of how does the option of using it medically take away the risk of children having access to it, and what the dangers are in terms of children actually consuming?
It doesn't take away the risk. We have a severe problem in Belize. And again, I guess my medical colleagues will not be happy what I have to say, but I always say it the way it is.
Yes.
And I do it the way it is. That's for the record. To be honest with you, the practice of medicine in Belize leaves a lot to be desired. As a society of doctors, a lot of doctors are not very honest. For example, you come to see me and you have a problem with your prostate, just an example. But you don't know who to come to see, but you trust me. You come to see me and I can identify what initially I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry, but this is not my area of expertise. Please, I refer you. I pick up the phone and I call this Dr. So-and-so, and can he receive this person for me? And you're going to ask me, Doc, how much I have for you? Nothing. I didn't solve your problem. The problem we have in Belize as doctors is that we hoard the patient. We keep the patient to ourselves, or if you belong to a little group of doctors, we go spreading it out.
Circle.
Right? You go seeing this, and if it's a specialty perspective, you go seeing this one, this one, this one. And this happens very frequently. Even if they are not the experts in it, they try to put a band-aid on the problem. My concern, and very big concern, is that because of the lack of ethics countrywide, that people will be authorized, if we were to have medical marijuana on the scene or available, that people who want it for leisure purposes are going to get a prescription written, and it's going to be dispersed, and there is going to be abuse. And of course, I'm not accusing, I'm just concerned that if anybody who has or owns or runs a pharmacy were to do the same thing, or a supplier, who would be the supplier of it.
Well, there's a reference point, because in California, I mean, you go in and you sneeze twice and they could give you a prescription for it because there's an economic value to it.
There is.
But isn't there a bunch of ethics that doctors have to follow, which would protect the society from that sort of behavior? And a medical board, I'm sure lawyers have a board that deals with behavior of lawyers that is not proper. Wouldn't the structure and ethics
there's a lot of politics in the medical circles, a lot of politics, and that's a blatant truth. I'm not talking party politics, that's one thing. Another thing is medical politics. So there's a group of people who control what happens in the country, how it goes this way and goes that way, at what point you get a license and what you get for. And certain people can be reprimanded and scolded and certain cannot be. And that's just the way it is. This is Belize. So objectivity, a lot needs to be done. A lot. There's a lot of work to be done for us to have the maturity as a medical society to take that step.
Awesome. I want to give you the opportunity to say, I mean, this has been an intriguing conversation. I really hope we have a part 2 to it, as the political side of it, and when I say politics, I don't mean partisan politics, as you say, but as the political side of it and the social side of it develops, I'm hoping that we can at the same time listen to conversations like yourself, honest conversations, and dry conversations about what's going on. But I want to give you an opportunity as we close to finally tell us anything that you feel is important about medical marijuana and what your position is.
I do believe firmly that there is a place for medical marijuana in our society. I believe this is the time now. I believe whichever government is in, it doesn't matter, present government, if there were to be a change, I believe that action should be taken in enforcing the doctors as a community to move forward to get medical marijuana on board, for protocols to be instilled and for things to be done, at least in this sense, the way it is done abroad. Not Belizeanize a protocol. You understand me? That we do it the way we look at it and we do it the backdoor way. I'm saying the way it is done with checks and balances, the way it is done all over the world for the benefit of people who can benefit from medical marijuana. That is, I'm a strong advocate for that. I support that point of view.
We want to thank you, Doc. There's a songwriter who says the truth is the truth, and that's no offense. We want to thank you for coming in this morning. But we have to take a break now, and when we come back on the other side of that break, we're going to talk about leadership. So stay tuned. It gets better.